My mother gave birth to my grandfather's child, making my little brother also my biological uncle, and now she expects me to raise him. You did not misread that. My mother seduced my dying grandfather to secure an inheritance, and when that money ran dry, she married my aunt and invaded my father's home to terrorize us. I am 19 years old, and I am currently shaking in a locked room while my father lies in the intensive care unit, suffering from a heart attack caused by their cruelty. This is not just a family dispute. It is a war over biology and money. I am trapped between a weak father who cannot fight and a mother who has weaponized her womb to destroy us. I had to make the most painful decision of my life to stop them. I chose to expose the darkest secrets of my bloodline to the world, humiliating my own mother to save my future. But now that the dust has settled and the police have taken them away, I do not feel free. I feel hollow. I looked into the mirror today and saw my mother's cold eyes staring back at me. I destroyed them, but I think I destroyed myself in the process. I am begging you to tell me, did I do the right thing? Or have I become the very monster I was trying to escape? They say blood is thicker than water, but in my experience, blood is just a sticky, metallic substance that ruins everything it touches. It stains your clothes, your reputation, and if you are unlucky enough to be born into my family, it stains your soul. My name is Brooklyn. I am 19 years old, a sophomore pre-law student, and currently a refugee in my own life. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, a town where the hedges are trimmed with laser precision and the scandals are buried under layers of old money and non-disclosure agreements. I occupy a sterile, 2-bedroom apartment paid for by my father. Mark, it is my fortress of solitude, a glass-walled cage designed to keep the chaos of my lineage at bay. I do not have a job in the traditional sense. My full-time occupation is maintaining my sanity and ensuring my grade point average remains high enough to eventually transfer to a law school on the West Coast, as far away from this toxic ecosystem as geographically possible. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and overcast, the kind of New England weather that seeps into your bones. I was sitting in the corner of the Gilded Bean, a coffee shop that charges $7 for an oat milk latte and charges you even more for the privilege of sitting among the local socialites. I loved this place. It was quiet. It smelled of roasted beans and expensive perfume. It was safe, or so I thought. I was highlighting a case study on contract law, trying to drown out the low hum of conversation around me. My phone lay face down on the table. Silence was my luxury. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the bitterness. Then, the bell above the door jingled. It was not a polite, welcoming jingle. It was aggressive, followed immediately by the screech of a stroller wheel that sounded like a dying animal. The atmospheric shift in the cafe was instant. Conversation stalled. The barista stopped steaming milk. I did not look up. I knew that sound. I knew the heavy, chaotic footsteps that followed it. My stomach dropped, a cold stone settling in my gut. Please, not here. Not today. Brooklyn? Oh my God. Look, babies, it is your big sister. The voice was shrill, cutting through the acoustic jazz playing over the speakers. It was a voice that could curdle fresh milk. I slowly lifted my head, my grip tightening on my highlighter until my knuckles turned white. Standing there, blocking the entrance like a natural disaster in designer knockoffs, was Jessica. My mother. She looked manic. Her blonde hair was teased too high, a desperate attempt to look like the Southern belle she never was. She wore a floral dress that was too tight for her age, 45, trying to pass for 30. But it was her eyes that terrified me. They were wide, glassy, and darting around the room, scanning for an audience. Jessica never performed without an audience, and she was not alone. Strapped into a double stroller that looked like it had survived a war zone were Tom and Jerry, my half-siblings. Technically, I stared at them, and a wave of nausea washed over me. Tom, about 4 years old, was chewing on the collar of his shirt, his eyes vacant and watery. Jerry, barely 3, was smearing something brown, chocolate, I hoped, onto the tray of the stroller. Do not engage. Just pack up and leave. Hello, Jessica, I said, my voice flat. I refused to call her mom in public. She lost that privilege 3 scandals ago. Jessica gasped, pressing a hand to her chest, the chunky gold bracelets on her wrist clanking together. Jessica, is that how you greet the woman who birthed you? After I have not seen you in weeks? It has been 6 days. I corrected, closing my textbook, and I am studying. She unbuckled the kids. This was the first red flag. You do not unleash toddlers in a coffee shop filled with laptops and porcelain mugs unless you want chaos. Go give Sissy a hug, she commanded, pushing them toward me. Tom stumbled forward. His nose was running, a thick line of green mucus trailing down to his lip. He looked at me, not with affection, but with confusion. He did not know who I was. I was just another obstacle in his confusing, neglected life. Stay there, Tom, I said sharply. I sounded cruel. I knew I did. But looking at him, Xiao Yuzing Haling, 2 hash is greater than it was, like looking at a crime scene. Tom was the son of my grandfather. My mother had slept with my father's father. This boy was my brother and my uncle. The biological math alone made me want to vomit. You are so cold, Jessica hissed, her voice rising an octave. She wanted people to look. She needed them to look. Your brothers miss you. We are family. Brooklyn. Family helps each other. We are not family. I whispered, glancing around. We are a genetic catastrophe. People were watching now. A woman in a cashmere sweater at the next table lowered her sunglasses. A man in a suit paused his typing. This was Greenwich. Judgment was the local currency. And Jessica was printing money. I need you to take them, Jessica said, her tone suddenly dropping the sweet facade. She leaned over the table, invading my personal space. I could smell her, a mix of cheap vanilla body spray and stale wine. Just for the weekend, Sarah and I have Xiaoting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than business. Sarah is your wife now, not just my aunt. I reminded her, feeling the absurdity of the sentence as it left my mouth. And no, I have finals coming up. I am not a babysitter. They are your flesh and blood, she screamed. That was the cue. Like clockwork, 3 phones went up at the surrounding tables. The cameras were rolling. Jessica saw them, and her posture changed instantly. She slumped her shoulders, transforming from the aggressor into the victim. Tears, impressive and instant, welled up in her eyes. I am trying so hard, she sobbed, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. I am a single mother doing my best. And you, Xiaoting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than sitting here with your expensive coffee, living in that luxury apartment your father pays for. Xiaoting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than you cannot even help your own mother for 2 days. Gaslighting, it was an art form, and she was Picasso. You are not a single mother, I said through gritted teeth, fighting the urge to throw my latte in her face. You are married to my aunt, and Dad pays you alimony. Where is that money? Jessica, it is not enough, she wailed. Do you know how much special needs therapy costs? Tom has developmental delays. Jerry needs speech therapy. She grabbed Tom's arm, pulling him up like a prop. The boy whimpered. Look at him. Brooklyn, look at your brother. He needs his big sister, and you are too busy being a selfish, entitled brat. The woman in the cashmere sweater made a sound of disapproval. I felt the heat rise up my neck. They did not know. They saw a tired, frantic mother and a cold, a well-dressed teenager refusing to help. They did not know that Tom's delays were likely because his parents shared too much genetic material. They did not know Jessica was probably going to a casino with Sarah. I am leaving, I said, shoving my books into my tote bag. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like lava in my veins. If you walk out that door, Jessica threatened, her voice low and venomous again, so only I could hear. I will call Child Protective Services. I will tell them you were watching them and you abandoned them here. I will tell them you are unstable. Saluting Zwei Raute ist größer als I froze. The air in the cafe felt thin, suffocating. She would do it. She absolutely would. She knew that a Child Protective Services investigation would ruin my father's reputation further and possibly derail my law school applications. You are insane, I whispered. I am desperate, she corrected, a twisted smile flickering on her lips. Then, loudly again for the cameras, please. Brooklyn, just this once. Do it for the babies. Jerry, the younger one, my brother and my cousin. I started to cry. It was a high-pitched, grating shriek. He banged his sticky hands on my table, overturning the sugar container. White granules spilled everywhere. Oh, look what you made him do, Jessica cried out, rushing to wipe it up with a napkin, playing the martyr. I am so sorry. Everyone, she is just Saluting Howling. 2 hashes greater than she is going through a phase. I looked at the barista. He looked away, uncomfortable. I was alone, surrounded by people, but utterly alone. I could not breathe. The walls of the cafe seemed to be closing in. The smell of coffee was replaced by the stench of manipulation. Fine. I lead. I had to get out. I needed air. Text me the details. I have to go. Wait. Take them now. She lunged for my arm. I jerked back, my chair screeching against the floor. Do not touch me. I grabbed my bag and bolted toward the door, leaving my half-drunk $7 latte behind. Brooklyn, you cannot run away from family. Her voice chased me out onto the street. I burst out onto the sidewalk, the cool Connecticut air hitting my face. I did not stop. I walked fast, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could feel the eyes of the cafe patrons burning into my back through the glass window. I knew the video would be on TikTok by the evening, entitled Generation Z Girl Abandons Crying Mother. I reached my car, a sensible gray sedan, and locked the doors the moment I was inside. My hands gripped the steering wheel, shaking uncontrollably. I looked in the rearview mirror. My reflection stared back, pale skin, dark circles under my eyes, lips pressed into a thin line. I looked like her. God help me. I looked just like her. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Jessica. See you Friday for dinner. Dad is coming too. Do not be late. Love you. Sweetie. I stared at the screen until it went black. The peace was gone. The fortress had been breached. The red flags were not just waving. They were burning. And as I started the engine, a singular, terrifying thought crossed my mind. She did not just want a babysitter. She wanted something else. Jessica never staged a scene that big unless the payout was going to be massive. I just did not know yet that the price tag was going to be my entire life. The drive to my father's estate usually took 20 minutes from my apartment, but today it felt like a funeral procession. The house sat on a hill overlooking the Long Island Sound, a sprawling structure of gray stone and manicured ivy that screamed old money and hidden secrets to the outside world. This was the residence of Mark, a successful investment banker and a pillar of the community. To me, it was a mausoleum. I punched the code into the iron gate. The heavy metal doors swung open with a groan, admitting me into the belly of the beast. I parked my sedan next to my father's pristine black luxury SUV. The contrast was laughable. My car was practical, a tool for escape. His car was a tank, designed to insulate him from a reality he refused to acknowledge. I turned off the ignition and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The encounter at the coffee shop was still vibrating under my skin. I could still smell Jessica's cheap perfume. I could still see the vacant, confusing eyes of my brother. No, not just my brother. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to confront the family tree that looked more like a tangled vine of poison ivy. It was a story I never told anyone, a secret that sat heavy in my gut like swallowed lead. 5 years ago, my grandfather, my father's father, was dying of cancer. He was a wealthy man, stubborn and lonely. Jessica, my mother, who had been divorced from my father for 2 years at that point, suddenly developed a deep sense of altruism. She moved in to care for him. Everyone thought it was an act of mercy. 9 months later, Tom was born. The DNA test was a formality. We all saw the resemblance. The old man's nose, the set of his jaw. My mother had seduced a dying man, her own former father-in-law, to secure a slice of the inheritance that was not addressed in the will. Tom was my half-brother. He was also my uncle, but Jessica was not done. When the money from the grandfather stalled in probate court, she turned her sights on the next weakest link, Uncle David, my father's younger, troubled brother, a recovering addict who was easily manipulated. 2 years later, Jerry arrived. My half-brother, my cousin. My mother had systematically slept her way through the male line of my father's family, planting flags of conquest in the form of children. She weaponized her womb. She turned procreation into a hostage situation. And the children? Tom and Jerry were not loved. They were leverage, living, breathing lawsuits. I opened my eyes, shaking the memories away. I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. It was always unlocked. My father had given up on security. He figured if the world wanted to hurt him, it would find a way in regardless of the locks. The house was silent. A grand foyer with marble floors stretched out before me, cold and echoey. "Dad?" I called out. No answer. I found him in his study, a cavernous room filled with leather-bound books that nobody read. He was sitting in his armchair, staring at the unlit fireplace. A glass of amber liquid sat untouched on the side table. He looked small. Mark was a tall man, but shame had a way of shrinking a person's skeleton. He looked deflated, like a balloon that had been losing air for a decade. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice raspy. He did not look at me. I walked over and sat on the ottoman opposite him. The room smelled of cedar and despair. I saw her today, I said softly. Mark flinched. Just the mention of her was a physical blow. She ambushed me at the coffee shop. I continued, my voice hardening. She had the boys. She made a scene. People filmed it. My father let out a long, ragged sigh. He reached for a folder on his lap and tossed it onto the coffee table between us. It slid across the polished wood, stopping inches from my hand. It is happening again, he whispered. I picked up the folder. Inside was a letter from a law firm I recognized. High-powered, vicious. They were suing for an increase in child support, but it was the logic that made my blood run cold. The legal argument claimed that because Tom was the biological son of the grandfather, he was entitled to a direct share of the estate equal to Mark's share. Bypassing the trust fund entirely, they were arguing that Tom was not a grandchild, but a rightful heir to the dynasty. They are twisting the knife, I said, reading the legal jargon. They want to bankrupt you. Dad, they want the house, Mark said, looking around the room with glassy eyes. Sarah called me this morning. Sarah, my aunt, my father's sister, and now my stepmother. The absurdity of it made me want to scream. What did she want? I asked. She says they are destitute. She says the video of you, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2# is greater than. He paused, finally looking at me. There was no accusation in his eyes, only exhaustion. She says the video of you abandoning the children is going viral locally. The Homeowners Association has already emailed me. They are concerned about the moral character of the residents. I slammed the folder shut. They are manipulating you, I shouted, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. That video is a lie. She set me up. I know, Mark said quietly. I know, Brooklyn, but the truth does not matter. Perception matters. My clients, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than. They trust me with their money because I am stable. If I am seen as a man who lets his grandchildren, or brothers, or whatever they are, starve in the street while I live in a mansion, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than. I am finished. The firm will let me go. He leaned forward, his face burying into his hands. Jessica called 10 minutes ago. He mumbled through his fingers. My stomach tightened. What did she say? She wants dinner. Friday night? A family dinner? No, I said immediately. Absolutely not. She says if we do not go, if we do not show a united front, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than. She will release the second video. Second video? I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no second video. I had left. She claims she has footage of you pushing Tom, Mark said, his voice trembling. I know you did not do it, but she says she has an angle that looks like it, and she will send it to the dean of your university. The room spun. My law school dreams, my future. She knew exactly where to aim. She was not just attacking my father's wallet. She was aiming for my throat. She is bluffing, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. We cannot take that risk, Mark whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. A father begging his daughter to walk into the fire with him. Just one dinner. Brooklyn, we go. We smile. We agree to help a little. We buy time until the lawyers can find a loophole. Please. I looked at him. This man who had paid for my apartment, my car, my tuition. This man who had stayed silent for years to protect me from the ugly truth of his own family. only to be consumed by it. He was weak. Yes, he was a coward, but he was the only ally I had. If I refused, she would destroy him, and then she would come for me. I felt a crack form inside my chest. It was the sound of my moral compass snapping under the weight of survival. Fine, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Mark exhaled, his shoulders sagging in relief. It was pathetic, but, I added, standing up. The air in the room felt toxic, and I needed to leave. If she says one thing, Sauting Haling, 2 hash is greater than one single thing out of line. Sauting Haling, 2 hash is greater than I am not staying silent. I am done playing the good daughter. Mark nodded, picking up his glass of scotch. He took a long swallow. We just need to survive Friday, he said. I turned and walked out of the study, leaving him in the gloom. I walked back through the silent marble hallway. I passed a family portrait hanging on the wall from 10 years ago. Me? Dad. Jessica. We looked happy. It was a lie then, and it was a lie now. I stepped out into the evening air. The sun had set, and the sky was a bruised purple. The wind was picking up, rattling the dry leaves on the driveway. I got into my car, but I did not start the engine immediately. I stared at the dark windows of the house. The fortress was not just breached. The enemy was already inside the walls, whispering from the shadows. Jessica wanted a dinner. She wanted a show. I gripped the steering wheel until my hands hurt. Fine. Mother, you want a performance? I will give you one, but you might not like the ending. I started the car, the engine roaring to life in the quiet night. As I drove away, down the winding driveway and through the iron gates, I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but beneath it, something else was beginning to boil. Hatred, pure, unadulterated hatred. Friday night was going to be a bloodbath. I just hoped the blood would not be mine. The restaurant was called the Olive Branch. It was one of those mid-tier Italian chain establishments found in every suburban strip mall across America. The kind of place that tried to simulate rustic Tuscany with fake ivy on the trellis and electric candles on the tables, but smelled faintly of bleach and microwaved marinara sauce. The irony of the name was not lost on me. We were not here for peace. We were here for a hostage negotiation. I sat in a booth upholstered in cracked red vinyl, my back rigid against the cushion. My father sat opposite me. Mark looked like he was awaiting execution. He kept adjusting his tie, loosening the knot and then tightening it again. A nervous tic that made me want to reach across the table and grab his hands. He had ordered a bottle of Merlot before we had even looked at the menus, and the glass in front of him was already half empty. They are late, I said, checking my wristwatch. It was 7:15. The reservation was for 7. They make an entrance. Brooklyn, Mark murmured, staring into his wine. They always make an entrance. The restaurant was loud, a cacophony of clattering silverware, crying babies, and the low roar of families trying to shout over one another. It was the perfect cover for the dysfunction about to unfold. I took a sip of my water, the ice cubes clinking against the glass. My throat felt like sandpaper. Then, the air in the room seemed to shift. I saw them before I heard them. Jessica and Sarah swept through the front entrance, oblivious to the hostess trying to intercept them. They were a visual assault. Jessica was wearing a white jumpsuit that was far too bridal for a casual dinner, complete with a plunging neckline that revealed sun-damaged skin. Sarah, my aunt, and my father's sister, wore a oversized flannel shirt and cargo pants, looking like she had just come from a construction site. Yet she walked with an air of arrogant entitlement that rivaled royalty. Trailing behind them were Tom and Jerry, unkempt and unrestrained. Tom was dragging a plastic dinosaur along the carpeted floor, knocking into the legs of other diners' chairs. Jerry was screaming something unintelligible, his face smeared with what looked like dried jam. I felt my stomach turn. This was my bloodline, a carnival of genetic errors on parade. "Over here," Jessica shrieked, waving her hand as if she were greeting fans at a premiere. She spotted us and made a beeline for the booth, ignoring the waiter who was trying to guide her. They slid into the booth next to my father, forcing him to scoot into the corner. The boys scrambled onto the bench next to me. The smell hit me instantly, a mixture of baby wipes, fast food grease, and Sarah's heavy musk cologne. "So glad you could make it." "Mark," Sarah said. She did not look at him with the affection of a sister. She looked at him with the predatory gaze of a loan shark. "Hello, Sarah," my father whispered. Jessica leaned across the table, her eyes glittering with manic energy. She reached out and patted my hand. I flinched, pulling my hand back as if I had touched a hot stove. "Brooklyn, sweetie, you look sautjinghaling. 2 is greater than tired," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Is school too much for you? Maybe you are taking on too much." "I am fine," I said coldly. "Let us order. I have to study later." "We have news," Jessica announced, ignoring my comment entirely. She grabbed Sarah's hand and lifted their interlaced fingers into the air. On Jessica's ring finger sat a new diamond. It was gaudy, likely cubic zirconia, but big enough to catch the light. "We made it official," Sarah beamed, puffing out her chest. "We went to the courthouse on Monday. We are married." Silence stretched across the table. I looked at my father. His face had gone gray. This was his ex-wife marrying his sister. The family tree was no longer branching. It was folding in on itself like a dying star. "Congratulations," Mark managed to choke out. I said nothing. I just stared at the ring. It felt like a joke, a grotesque, cosmic joke. "But that is not the big news," Sarah said, leaning back and resting a hand on her stomach. She looked at me with a smug grin, the kind of look a bully gives you before they shove you into a locker. "We are expanding the family," Jessica squealed. "Sarah is pregnant." The world stopped. The noise of the restaurant faded into a dull buzz. I stared at Sarah's stomach. She was 40 years old. "Pregnant?" I repeated, my voice hollow. "Yes," Sarah announced loudly. "Through in vitro fertilization, we found a donor. It took the last of our savings, but it is a miracle, is it not? Another little angel to join the pack." I looked at Tom, who was currently chewing on the salt shaker. I looked at Jerry, who was banging his fork against the table. Another one? They were bringing another innocent child into this cesspool. "Who is the donor?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. My mind immediately raced to the darkest possibilities. Given their track record, I would not put it past them to have raided a sperm bank that specialized in my father's relatives. An anonymous donor. "Obviously," Sarah snapped, her smile faltering for a second. "Why do you always have to be so suspicious? Brooklyn, you should be happy for us. You are going to be a big sister again, and a cousin." I muttered, "Excuse me?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Nothing," I said, grabbing my menu to hide my shaking hands. The waiter arrived, a nervous teenager who clearly sensed the tension. We ordered quickly. I asked for a salad I knew I would not eat. Jessica ordered the most expensive steak on the menu and pointed to Mark. He is paying. Once the waiter left, the real ambush began. So, Jessica started, intertwining her fingers and resting her chin on them. With the new baby coming, and Sarah needing to rest, Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 hash is greater than we have been thinking about our living situation. Here it comes. I thought, the ask for money. We are cramped in that apartment, Sarah said, taking a breadstick and biting into it aggressively. And honestly, with 3 kids, it is going to be impossible. We need help. We need family. Mark reached for his checkbook, his hand trembling. How much do you need for rent? No, Mark, put that away, Jessica said, waving a hand dismissively. We do not want your money. Well, not just your money. We want support. She turned her gaze to me. It was a heavy, suffocating stare. Brooklyn, honey, your semester ends in 2 weeks, right? I nodded slowly, wary of the trap, and you have that big, beautiful apartment all to yourself. She continued, 2 bedrooms, a doorman. It is so safe. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, we were thinking, Sarah interrupted, talking with her mouth full, that since you are family, and you are the big sister, you should let us move in for a few months. Just until the baby comes. You can help with Tom and Jerry. They love you, and it would be good practice for you. You know, learning some responsibility instead of living in your ivory tower. I stared at them. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted to invade my sanctuary. They wanted to turn my safe haven into a nursery for their twisted brood. Absolutely not, I said. My voice was low, but it was steady. Mark looked down at his plate. He was not going to save me. I was on my own. Jessica's face crumpled. The transition from sweet to victim was instantaneous. How can you be so selfish? She whimpered, her voice rising. We are destitute. Brooklyn, your aunt is carrying a life. We are family. I am a student, I said, my voice rising to match hers. That apartment is for my education. It is not a shelter for your Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 hash is greater than mistakes. Mistakes? Sarah slammed her hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Tom started to cry. Do you hear that? Jessica? She calls her brother's mistakes. She is just jealous. Jessica spat, her eyes hardening into slits. She has always been jealous of our happiness. She cannot stand that her mother found love with a woman. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling. 2 Rautes größer als I froze. What? I whispered. You are homophobic, Jessica declared loudly. Heads turned at the nearby tables. That is what this is. You hate that I married your aunt. You are a bigot. Brooklyn, I raised you better than that. The accusation hit me like a physical slap. It was so calculated. She was using a social justice shield to protect her moral bankruptcy. She was weaponizing her sexuality to distract from the incest, the manipulation, and the abuse. I am not homophobic, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I am disgusted. There is a difference. Disgusted by what? Our love? Sarah challenged, leaning in. Disgusted by the fact that you slept with my grandfather, I hissed. Disgusted that you slept with my uncle. Disgusted that you are turning this family into a biological experiment. Liar, Jessica screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair back. She was performing now. The cameras were out. I could see the phones raised in the periphery of my vision. She is lying. My daughter is mentally unstable. She hates these children. I looked at the boys. Tom was staring at me, snot running down his face. Jerry was laughing, oblivious, stabbing the vinyl seat with a fork. I looked at my father. He was shrinking into the booth, wishing he could disappear. Something inside me snapped. It was not a decision. It was an eruption. The pressure valve that had been holding back years of shame, anger, and humiliation finally blew. I stood up. My legs felt like steel springs. "You want a scene?" I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence of the restaurant. "I will give you a scene." I grabbed the edge of the table. It was heavy, bolted to the floor, but the top was loose. With a scream of pure, primal frustration, I heaved it upward. Plates crashed to the floor. Glasses shattered. The bottle of Merlot tipped over, spilling red wine like blood across the white tablecloth and onto Jessica's bridal jumpsuit. Pandemonium. Jessica shrieked as the wine soaked into her clothes. Sarah jumped back, cursing. The boys started wailing in terror. "You are monsters," I screamed, pointing a shaking finger at them. I did not care who was filming. I did not care about the law school application. I wanted to burn it all down. "You are leeches. You suck the life out of everything you touch." I turned to the children. I knew it was cruel. I knew they were innocent victims in this. But in that moment, all I saw was the manifestation of my mother's sins. "And you," I shouted at the crying boys. "Stop looking at me. I am not your sister. I am not your nanny. You are abominations." The word hung in the air, heavy and unforgivable. The entire restaurant was silent, save for the crying of the children. A manager was running toward us, his face pale. "Brooklyn, Sao Tsing Haoling." "Two hash is greater than," my father whispered, horror written all over his face. I looked at him. I looked at the mess I had made. The broken glass, the stained clothes, the crying children. I felt a strange, cold clarity. "I am done," I said. I grabbed my purse and stepped over a pile of spaghetti on the floor. I walked past the stunned manager. I walked past the diners who were holding their phones up like shields. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. I did not look back. I left my father to pay the bill. I left him to clean up the mess. But as I marched to my car, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, I knew one thing for certain. This was not the end. I had just declared war. And Jessica? She was going to make sure the retaliation was nuclear. I got into my car, locked the doors, and screamed until my throat tasted like blood. The image of Sarah's smirk and Jessica's wine-stained white suit burned into my retinas. They would come for me now. They would come for the apartment. They would come for everything. I had to be ready. The internet is not a courtroom. It is a coliseum, and the crowd does not want justice. They want blood. For 3 days, I did not leave my apartment. I sat on my beige sofa, wrapped in a weighted blanket, watching my life disintegrate on a 5-inch screen. The video from the restaurant had gone viral. Of course it had. It had everything the algorithm loved. A wealthy white girl, a screaming match, a same-sex couple, and crying children. The caption on the most popular upload read, entitled "Rich Girl Assaults Lesbian Moms and Babies at Dinner." It had 3 million views. I scrolled through the comments, my thumb moving rhythmically, a form of self-flagellation. "She looks like a psycho. Look at those poor kids. They are terrified. I hope she gets arrested." This is what happens when you never hear the word no. Nobody asked why I did it. Nobody knew that the woman in the wine-stained jumpsuit was my mother, who had slept with my grandfather. Nobody knew the toddler was my uncle. Context was dead. Only the clip mattered. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was not a text. It was a summons. Come to the house. Now. Dad. I dragged myself into the shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash away the feeling of the restaurant, the smell of the wine, and the digital filth of the comment section. I dressed in black, like I was going to a funeral. In a way, I was going to mourn the death of my reputation. When I arrived at the estate, the atmosphere was different. The gate was closed. I had to buzz in. A security guard I did not recognize was patrolling the perimeter. My father was finally taking security seriously, but he was locking the barn door after the horses had already been slaughtered. I found Mark in the library. He was not alone. Sitting across from him was Mr. Henderson, the family attorney. Henderson had been handling our family's affairs for 20 years. He was a man who spoke in billable hours and wore suits that cost more than my tuition. Mark looked worse than he had at the restaurant. His skin was the color of old parchment. His eyes were bloodshot. He did not stand up when I entered. Sit down. Brooklyn, Henderson said. His voice was grave. I sat. The leather chair felt cold. We have a problem, Henderson began, sliding a thick document across the mahogany desk. I glanced at the header. It was a filing from the Connecticut Family Court. Jessica and Sarah have filed a motion, Henderson explained, clasping his hands together. They are not just asking for child support anymore. They are challenging your grandfather's will. I frowned. Grandfather died 3 years ago. The probate is closed. It can be reopened if a pretermitted heir is discovered, Henderson said. A what? I asked. A pretermitted heir, he repeated. A child born after the will was executed who was not provided for. Jessica's lawyer is arguing that Tom is the biological son of your grandfather, since your grandfather did not know about Tom when he wrote his will. The law assumes he would have wanted to provide for him. I felt the room spin. They are arguing that Tom is an heir. They are arguing that Tom is entitled to an intestate share. Henderson corrected. That means he gets what he would have received if there was no will. If the DNA test confirms paternity, which we know it will, Tom effectively steps into the shoes of a son. He would be entitled to 1/3 of the entire estate. 1/3? I choked out. That is millions of dollars. That is the money for the house, the money for the business. Mark finally spoke. His voice was a dry whisper. They want the house. Brooklyn. They want to liquidate the assets to pay out Tom's share. It is brilliant. In a sick, twisted way, Henderson admitted, removing his glasses and cleaning them with a silk cloth. Jessica knows we cannot fight the DNA test. If we go to court, the whole story comes out. The incest, the affair. The press would have a field day. Your father's firm would collapse under the scandal. So, what do we do? I asked, looking from the lawyer to my father. We fight them, right? We prove she is a predator. We prove she manipulated a dying man. Henderson Seahill. Undue influence is hard to prove, especially when the man is dead. And right now, public opinion is not on your side. That video, Sayu Tsinghao Ling, R. Tsinghao Dayu. He let the sentence hang in the air. The video, the weapon I had handed them. They have offered a settlement, Mark said, staring at the floor. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. What kind of settlement? They want a lump sum cash payment of $500,000 immediately, Mark said. and they want us to pay for Sarah's medical bills for the duration of the pregnancy. High-risk obstetrics, private rooms, the works. 500,000? I screamed. Dad, that is extortion. It is hush money. Henderson corrected calmly. And if we pay it? I asked. Will they go away? Mark let out a bitter laugh. It was a sound void of humor. They say they will drop the estate lawsuit. They will sign a non-disclosure agreement. They will burn through that money in a year. I argued, standing up, and then they will come back. They have Tom. They have Jerry. They have a biological gold mine. And they will keep mining it until you are dry. Sit down. Brooklyn, Mark shouted. I froze. My father never shouted. You did this. He hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. You provoked them at the restaurant. You humiliated them. Now they are vindictive. Before, they just wanted rent money. Now they want blood. I stared at him. The betrayal stung more than the public shaming. I stood up for you. I whispered. I was the only one who told the truth. The truth is expensive. Brooklyn, Mark said, pouring himself a drink from the crystal decanter on his desk. It was 10 in the morning. We are going to pay. Mark decided. I instructed Henderson to liquidate my portfolio. We will pay the medical bills. We will give them the cash. You are making a mistake, I said, my voice shaking. You are feeding a tumor. It is going to grow. I need you to leave, Mark said, turning his back to me. Excuse me? I need distance, he said. The partners at the firm are asking questions about the video. They are asking about my parenting. It is best if you stay at your apartment for a while. Do not come here. Do not engage with Jessica. Just Haling. 2# is greater than disappear. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was cutting me off. He was isolating me. You are choosing the easy way out, I said, backing toward the door. But there is no easy way out with her. She is going to take everything. Dad, and when she does, you will be all alone in this big, empty house. Mark did not answer. He just drank his scotch. I walked out of the library. I walked out of the house. The drive back to the city was a blur. I felt a crushing sense of claustrophobia. The walls were closing in. My father was weak. My mother was a monster. The law was a weapon being used against us. When I got back to my apartment building, the doorman stopped me. He was a nice man named Ralph who usually greeted me with a smile. Today, he looked uncomfortable. Miss Brooklyn, he said, lowering his voice. There was a woman here earlier. She left an envelope for you. I took the envelope. It was heavy, cream-colored stationery. I knew exactly who it was from. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the lock. Once inside, I threw my bag on the floor and tore open the envelope. It was a thank you card. On the front was a picture of a stork carrying a bundle. Inside, in Jessica's looping, childish handwriting, was a message. Thank you for dinner the other night. Sorry it ended so abruptly. We missed you. By the way, Sarah and I loved your apartment. It has such great light. It would be perfect for a nursery. Give your dad a hug for us. We will be seeing a lot more of each other. I dropped the card. It fluttered to the floor like a white feather. She was not done. The lawsuit, the settlement, the medical bills. Haling, 2# is greater than that was just the opening salvo. She did not just want the money. She wanted my space. She wanted to displace me. I looked around my living room, the sanctuary I had built, the only place where I felt safe. It was tainted now. She had been here. She had stood in my lobby. She was circling. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street 12 stories below. Cars moved like ants. People went about their lives, oblivious to the fact that monsters walked among them, wearing floral dresses and pushing strollers. My phone buzzed again. A notification from my bank app. Alert. Your monthly allowance transfer has been canceled by the sender. I stared at the screen. Mark had cut the funding. He was punishing me. He thought that if he starved me out, I would stop fighting. He thought that if he appeased the beast, it would eat me last. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. The tears finally came, hot and angry. I was 19 years old. I had no income. I was the villain of the internet, and my mother was coming to take the roof over my head. But as I sat there, crying in the afternoon sun, a thought occurred to me, a dark, cold thought that dried my tears instantly. If the law could not protect me, and my father would not protect me, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than, then I had to stop playing by the rules. Jessica wanted a war. She wanted to use family secrets as ammunition. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. Due cancelletto è maggiore di fine. I wiped my face. I stood up. I walked into my bedroom and pulled a shoebox from the top shelf of my closet. Inside was an old iPhone 6, cracked and dusty. It belonged to my Uncle David before he went to rehab. Before Jessica got her claws into him, he had left it at the house years ago, and I had kept it. I did not know what was on it, but if Jessica had a history, maybe she left digital footprints. I plugged the phone into the charger. The battery icon flashed red. It was time to go digging. The human heart is roughly the size of a fist. It is a simple pump, a biological machine designed to keep the rhythm of life going. But my father's heart was not just a muscle. It was a storage unit for 20 years of secrets, shame, and suppression. Eventually, even the strongest container cracks under too much pressure. It happened on a Wednesday morning. I received the call from his secretary, a woman named Linda, who usually spoke in a monotone corporate drawl. This time, she was sobbing. Mark had collapsed in the middle of a board meeting. 1 minute, he was discussing quarterly projections, and the next, he was clutching his chest, gasping for air as if the room had suddenly been vacuumed of oxygen. I drove to the hospital in a trance. The world outside my car window was a blur of gray highway and red brake lights. When I arrived at the intensive care unit, my father looked like a stranger. He was pale, almost translucent, hooked up to a symphony of beeping machines that breathed for him. The doctor used words like myocardial infarction and stress-induced cardiomyopathy. I stood by his bedside, listening to the rhythmic hiss of the ventilator. He was unconscious, finally getting the rest he had been denied for years. But even in sleep, his brow was furrowed. I held his hand. It was cold. "You have to wake up," I whispered. "You cannot leave me alone with them." He did not squeeze back. I stayed for 6 hours until the nurses told me I had to leave for the shift change. They told me to go home, get some rest, and bring back his personal items, his toiletries, his glasses, comfortable clothes for when he woke up. I walked out of the hospital feeling a strange hollowness. The shield was gone. Mark was incapacitated. For the first time in my life, there was absolutely nothing standing between me and the wolves. I drove to the estate. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long, jagged shadows across the lawn. As I turned up the winding driveway, I expected the usual silence. I expected the dark windows of an empty house. Instead, I saw the minivan. It was parked right in front of the main entrance. 2 wheels on the grass, crushing the pristine hydrangeas. My father paid a landscaping crew thousands of dollars to maintain. The back hatch was open, revealing a cavernous, empty trunk. My stomach dropped. I parked my car and ran to the front door. I punched in the security code. 1, 2, 3, 4. The light turned green. They had not changed the locks yet. I pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped into the foyer. The smell hit me first. It was the smell of violation. The estate usually smelled of lemon polish and fresh lilies. Now, it smelled of fried chicken, stale diapersinia, and something cloyingly sweet, like cheap berry air freshener sprayed over garbage. "Hello?" I called out. My voice did not echo. It was absorbed by the heaviness in the air. I walked into the living room. My knees almost buckled. It looked like a campsite. Mattresses had been dragged down from the guest rooms and laid out on the Persian rug. Suitcases were exploded open, clothes strewn everywhere. On the antique coffee table, a family bucket of fried chicken sat open, grease staining the wood. And there, sitting in my father's favorite leather armchair, was Jessica. She was wearing one of Mark's silk robes. It was too big for her. The sleeves rolled up clumsily. She held a glass of his expensive scotch in one hand and the television remote in the other. Tom was running in circles around the room, wearing only a diaper. Jerry was asleep on a pile of couch cushions. Jessica looked up at me. She did not look surprised. She looked comfortable. "Ush," she whispered, putting a finger to her lips. Jerry just went down. He has been fussy all day. The stress of the move. I stood frozen in the doorway, my brain struggling to process the visual data. "What are you doing here?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. "We are here to help," Jessica said, taking a sip of the scotch. She swirled the amber liquid, admiring the color. "Poor Mark. We heard about the heart attack. It is tragic. Really, stress is a silent killer." "Get out," I said. "Get out of this house." Sarah walked in from the kitchen. She was eating a yogurt, my father's yogurt, and licking the spoon. "We are not going anywhere, Brooklyn," Sarah said, leaning against the doorframe. "We have rights. You have no rights." I spat. "This is trespassing. I am calling the police." I pulled my phone out of my pocket. "Go ahead," Jessica said, unbothered. "Call them. Tell them that the mother of the homeowner's children and his pregnant sister-in-law are here to care for the house while he is in the hospital. Tell them we have established residency." "Residency?" I laughed. A harsh, barking sound. "You have been here for 2 hours. We have mail," Sarah said, holding up an envelope. I squinted at it. It was a utility bill change of address confirmation. "We switched the electric bill to Jessica's name this morning," Sarah explained with a smirk. "As soon as we heard the ambulance sirens, we knew someone had to step up. In the eyes of the law, we are tenants. If you want us out, you have to evict us. And you know how long that takes in Connecticut? 6 months. Minimum." I stared at them. It was a coup. A seamless, predatory takeover. They had waited for the lion to fall, and now the hyenas were moving into the den. "This is my father's house," I said, my voice shaking. "And Tom is his son," Jessica countered, her eyes hardening. "Or his brother. Either way, this is his family home. We have just as much right to be here as you do. Probably more, considering you tried to kill him with stress." I stepped forward. I wanted to drag her out of that chair. I wanted to tear that robe off her body. "You are sick," I whispered. Jessica stood up. She walked over to me, bringing the smell of alcohol and malice with her. We are survivors, Brooklyn, and right now, we are the ones in charge. Mark is in a coma. He granted me power of attorney years ago when we were married. In case of emergency, he never revoked it. My blood ran cold. He divorced you. I said, he forgot to file the paperwork to cancel the medical proxy. She smiled. I checked with the lawyer. I am the one who makes the decisions now. I am the one who decides who visits him. I am the one who decides when they pull the plug. The room spun. She held his life in her hands. She held the house. She held everything. So here is how it is going to be. Jessica continued, poking a manicured finger into my chest. You are going to go back to your little apartment. You are going to keep your mouth shut, and you are going to let us live here in peace. If you cause a scene, if you try to call the cops, 少已经号令, 2 hash is greater than. I might just decide that Mark's quality of life is too poor to sustain. I looked at her eyes. There was no soul there, just a black hole of greed and resentment. I looked at Sarah, who was watching with a cruel grin, rubbing her pregnant belly. I looked at the mess they had made of the only home I had ever known. They expected me to run. They expected me to flee back to the city, terrified and defeated, just like I did at the coffee shop, just like I did at the restaurant. But something inside me shifted. It was a physical sensation, like a gear grinding into place. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. If I left, I lost. If I walked out that door, they would strip this house to the studs. They would kill my father, either through negligence or malice. I looked at the pile of suitcases. I looked at the empty bucket of chicken. No, I said. Jessica blinked. Excuse me? I am not leaving. I said. I walked past her, deliberately bumping her shoulder. She stumbled back, spilling a splash of scotch onto the rug. Hey, Sarah shouted. I walked to the staircase. I climbed the steps, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. Where do you think you are going? Jessica shrieked from the bottom of the stairs. I stopped at the landing and looked down at them. I live here, I said calmly. My name is on the deed too. Mark put me on the title when I turned 18. It was a lie, a bluff, but they did not know that I am moving back in. I announced, and I am going to be watching you, every move you make, every dollar you spend. I turned and walked toward my old bedroom. You cannot do that, Sarah yelled. We need privacy. I opened my bedroom door. It was untouched, a time capsule from before the madness. I walked inside and slammed the door shut. I locked it. I leaned against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode, just like my father's. I was trapped. I was locked in a house with 2 sociopaths and 3 children who were biological time bombs. I had no allies. I had no weapons, but I was inside. I looked at the heavy brass lamp on my nightstand. I looked at the letter opener on my desk. I was not the victim anymore. I was the resistance. The war for the house had begun, and I was not leaving until one of us was in handcuffs or a body bag. The mansion was no longer a home. It was a battlefield, and the lines of engagement were drawn across the hardwood floors in sticky juice stains and muddy boot prints. It had been 5 days since the occupation began. 5 days of waking up to the sound of screaming children and the smell of bacon grease permeating the expensive tapestries. I had stopped going to my university classes. I could not leave. If I left, even for an hour, I was terrified that I would return to find the locks changed and my belongings burning in a heap on the front lawn. I was technically a student at an Ivy League institution, but my real major was now guerrilla warfare. I sat at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows of the landing, watching them. It was 11 in the morning. Jessica was sprawled on the pristine white sofa in the living room, her feet resting on the coffee table. She was watching a reality television show about housewives who threw wine at each other. The irony was suffocating. Tom was in the corner, smashing a toy truck against the glass display cabinet that held my father's collection of antique pocket watches. Every thud sent a spike of adrenaline through my veins. Jessica. I called down, my voice hoarse from days of shouting. Tell him to stop. That glass is vintage. She did not even look up. He is playing. Brooklyn, she drawled, taking a bite of a bagel. Stop stifling his creativity. You are such a buzzkill. Saoyudzeng Haolin. 2 hash is greater than crack. A spiderweb fracture appeared on the glass. Tom giggled, a hollow sound that lacked genuine joy. He looked back at his mother for approval, but she was too absorbed in the television. I gripped the banister until my knuckles turned white. I wanted to run down there. I wanted to shake her, but I knew the rules of engagement. The moment I touched her, or the children, the police would be called. And this time, they would not just take a report. They would take me away in handcuffs. I had tried to call the police on the first day. 2 officers had arrived, looked at Jessica's power of attorney paperwork, looked at the pregnant woman crying on the couch, and shrugged. It is a civil matter, ma'am, the older officer had told me. Adjusting his belt, you have to take it up in probate court. We cannot evict family members with established residency without a court order. Civil matter. The phrase haunted me. There was nothing civil about this. I retreated to my room, my bunker. I had moved a mini fridge in there and installed a deadbolt on the door myself, using my father's tools from the garage. It was the only square footage in the house that was still mine, but they were testing the perimeter. I walked over to my desk to check my laptop. I was trying to draft an email to the dean of my college explaining my absence, but the words would not come. How do you explain that your mother is holding your house hostage? Suddenly, the power cut out. My laptop screen dimmed. The hum of the central air conditioning died, leaving a sudden, ringing silence. I frowned. It was a clear day. No storms. Then I heard the laughter. It was coming from the hallway. I opened my door and stepped out. The hallway was dark. Did you pay the bill, Princess? Sarah's voice floated up from the darkness. I walked to the top of the stairs. Sarah was standing by the utility panel near the kitchen. The metal door swung open. She was holding a flashlight under her chin, illuminating her face like a ghost story villain. Oops, she said, feigning innocence. I think I tripped a breaker. This house is so old. The wiring must be faulty. Turn it back on. Sarah, I said, walking down the stairs carefully. Make me. She sneered. She was baiting me. She wanted me to get physical. She wanted me to push a pregnant woman so she could sue me for everything I had left. I am not playing this game, I said, walking past her toward the breaker box. She stepped in front of me, blocking the panel with her protruding belly. She was wearing a crop top, exposing the stretch marks of her pregnancy like a badge of honor. You know, stress is bad for the baby, she whispered, leaning in close. Her breath smelled of onions. If you stress me out and I miscarry, 少于好零. 2 hashes greater than that is manslaughter. Is it not? Or at least assault. Get out of my way, I said through gritted teeth. Touch me, she challenged. I dare you. I stood there, my hands shaking. I could physically move her. She was shorter than me, weighed down by the pregnancy. It would be so easy to just shove her aside, but I saw the phone in her hand. The camera lens was black and unblinking. It was recording. I stepped back. You are pathetic. I spat, I turned, and walked away, leaving the power off. If they wanted darkness, I would give them darkness. I went to the basement. The main water valve was located behind the furnace. It was a heavy, rusted wheel that had not been turned in years. I gripped it with both hands. I channeled every ounce of my rage, every insult, every humiliation into my arms. I groaned as the metal resisted, screeching in protest. With a final, violent heave, the wheel turned, then again and again. The hissing sound of water moving through the pipes stopped. I marched back upstairs. The house was now silent and beginning to warm up without the air conditioning. Two can play at this game, I muttered. I went back to my room and locked the door. An hour later, the screaming started. It was Jessica. Brooklyn, turn the water back on. I have shampoo in my hair. I put on my noise-canceling headphones. I played classical music at maximum volume. The chaos of the house faded into a distant vibration, but the victory was short-lived. That evening, as the sun went down and the house plunged into true darkness, a smell began to drift under my door. It was not the smell of food. It was the smell of sewage. I took off my headphones. I heard the sound of running water, but it was not coming from the pipes. It was coming from the hallway. I unlocked my door and looked out. My heart stopped. The hallway carpet, an antique Persian runner that my grandmother had brought over from Iran, was soaked. Water was seeping out from under the bathroom door across the hall. I ran to the bathroom. The door was locked. Jessica, Sarah, I screamed, pounding on the wood. What did you do? Sarah's voice came from inside, muffled and manic. The toilet got clogged. We tried to flush it, but it just kept overflowing. And since you turned the main water off, the tank just... Haling. 2 hashes greater than well. Actually, we brought a bucket from the pool. We had to flush somehow. They were flooding the house on purpose. They were destroying the very asset they were trying to steal. I ran downstairs to turn the water back on, realizing my mistake. I had tried to use logic against chaos agents. I had tried to use tactical strikes against people who were willing to nuke the entire site. By the time I got the water valve open and ran back upstairs, the damage was done. The hallway was a swamp. The water had seeped through the floorboards. I could see a damp stain spreading on the ceiling of the living room below. I stood in the wet hallway, my socks soaking up the gray water. The bathroom door opened. Sarah stepped out, dry and smiling. You really should call a plumber, she said. This place is falling apart. I looked at her. I looked at the ruin around me, and then I broke. It was not a scream. It was a sob that tore through my chest, ragged and painful. I slid down the wall, sitting in the puddle of toilet water. I put my head in my hands. I cannot do this, I whispered. I was 19. I was studying contract law. I was supposed to be worrying about finals and internships. Instead, I was sitting in sewage, fighting a war against my own mother and the aunt she married. Jessica appeared at the top of the stairs. She had rinsed her hair with bottled water. She looked down at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. Look at you, she said softly. You are a mess. Brooklyn. She crouched down, careful not to get her robe wet. "Why do you not just go?" she asked. "Just sign the paper." "Honey, sign the paper agreeing to the settlement, and you can go back to your nice, clean apartment in the city. You can go back to being a student. We will take care of Mark. We will take care of the house." It sounded so tempting. The offer of surrender always does when you are covered in filth. I looked up at her. Her face was blurry through my tears. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why do you hate us so much?" Jessica's face hardened. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. "Hate?" She laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. "I do not hate you, Brooklyn. I envy you. You have everything handed to you. Mark gave you the world. And what did he give me? Alimony checks that barely cover my spa treatments." She stood up, towering over me. "I am just taking what I am owed," she said, "interest included." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor where the carpet ended. "Come on, Sarah," she called out. "Let us order pizza. I am starving." I sat there in the dark, wet hallway for a long time. The smell was unbearable. The humiliation was total, but as the tears dried on my face, leaving my skin tight and itchy, a realization began to form in the wreckage of my mind. I had been fighting them with anger. I had been fighting them with petty retaliation. I had been trying to make their lives uncomfortable. But parasites thrive in discomfort. They thrive in filth. I could not outgross them. I could not outcrazy them. I needed to cut the head off the snake. I needed to destroy them. Not their comfort, but their lives, their freedom. I remembered the conversation in the coffee shop. I remembered the conversation in the restaurant. They were always performing. They were always lying. But every lie has a kernel of truth hidden somewhere. Sarah said she was pregnant via in vitro fertilization. Jessica said they were destitute. But in vitro fertilization costs tens of thousands of dollars. If they were broke, how did they afford it? And if they were not broke, then the lawsuit for support was fraud. And the grandfather, the affair. I stood up. My wet clothes clung to my skin. I felt cold, but my mind was burning hot. I walked into my room and stripped off my ruined clothes. I took a shower in my private bathroom, scrubbing my skin until it was raw. I dressed in clean clothes. I sat down at my desk. I pulled out the cracked iPhone 6 I had found in the closet. My Uncle David's phone. I plugged it into my laptop. I needed passwords. I needed dates. I needed proof. I was done playing defense. I looked at the reflection of my room in the window. It was dark outside. The house was quiet again, save for the murmuring of the television downstairs. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. Let them think that tomorrow I would apologize. Tomorrow I would offer to cook dinner. Tomorrow I would lower my shield. And then I would slit their throats, metaphorically speaking, or maybe, if the law failed me again, Saoyudzing 2 hashes greater than not so, metaphorically. I opened a blank document on my laptop. I typed a single line at the top of the page. Operation Bloodline. The tragedy was over. The revenge was about to begin. If you want to trap a rat, you do not chase it with a broom. You do not scream at it. You place a piece of cheese in the center of the room. You turn off the lights, and you wait. You wait until its hunger outweighs its instinct for survival. My mother and her wife were not rats. They were something far more complex and dangerous. But they shared the same fatal flaw, an insatiable appetite. They were hungry for money, for validation, and for the thrill of dominance. I spent the morning cleaning the hallway. I scrubbed the water damage on my hands and knees. The smell of bleach burning my nostrils. It was an act of penance, a visual performance of submission. When Jessica walked by, stepping over my legs without a word, I did not look up. I kept my head down, scrubbing the same spot of hardwood until the varnish began to strip away. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the house was clean, or at least superficial cleanliness had been restored. The rot was still there, festering beneath the floorboards, but the surface was polished. I went to my father's wine cellar in the basement. It was a climate-controlled vault that held bottles worth more than my car. I selected a 1996 Cabernet Sauvignon. It was my father's favorite. He had been saving it for my graduation. It felt poetic to sacrifice it now. I brought the bottle upstairs, along with 3 crystal glasses. I set the dining room table. I did not use the everyday plates. I used the fine china, the gold-rimmed porcelain that was only touched on Thanksgiving. I placed the phone, my Uncle David's old iPhone, fully charged, and with the voice memo app open, under the center of the table. I taped it securely to the underside of the heavy oak wood, right in the middle, where it would catch every whisper, every clink of a glass, every lie. Then I went to find them. They were in the sunroom. Jessica was scrolling through her phone, likely deleting negative comments on her latest video. Sarah was napping on the chaise lounge, her hand resting protectively over her stomach. "Can we talk?" I asked. My voice was soft, trembling slightly. I had practiced this tone in the mirror for an hour. Jessica looked up, her eyes narrowed. "If this is about the water, I am not interested," she said. "It is not," I said, looking at the floor. "It is about me. Ling. 2# is greater than I realized something today." Sarah stirred, opening one sleepy eye. "What did you realize?" Sarah asked. "I realized that I cannot win," I said. I let out a long, shuddering breath. "I am tired of fighting you. You are right. This is your house too. Tom and Jerry are family. And with the new baby coming, Ling. 2# is greater than I have been selfish." Jessica sat up straighter. The predator sensed weakness. "Go on," she said. "I want to make a peace offering." I said. "I made dinner, and I opened a bottle of Dad's best wine. I think we should sit down and discuss a settlement, a real one." Jessica looked at Sarah. A silent communication passed between them. Suspicion, followed by curiosity, followed by greed. "Fine," Jessica said, standing up and smoothing her silk robe. "But do not think a pasta dinner is going to fix everything. It will not," I agreed. "But what I have to offer might." I led them to the dining room. The lights were dimmed. The table looked elegant, a stark contrast to the chaos of the last few days. I poured the wine. The dark red liquid swirled in the crystal glasses. I sat at the head of the table. Jessica sat to my right. Sarah sat to my left. They were directly over the microphone. "So," Jessica said, reaching for her glass immediately, "what is this offer?" I took a deep breath. I needed to sell this. It had to be the performance of my life. "I know you are suing the estate," I began. "I know you want 1/3 of the inheritance for Tom, and I know the lawyers are going to drag this out for years. By the time you get the money, the legal fees will have eaten half of it. That is your father's problem," Sarah said, reaching for her own glass. "Wait," I said, feigning concern. "Sarah, should you be drinking? You are pregnant." Sarah paused, the glass halfway to her lips. She looked at Jessica, then back at me. She let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. 1 glass will not hurt. She said, my doctor said it helps with the stress. And God knows you have given me enough stress to kill a horse. She took a large gulp. I watched her throat move. Red flag. No reputable doctor tells a high-risk pregnancy patient to drink heavy red wine. Anyway, I continued, keeping my voice steady. I want to propose an alternative. I have a trust fund. Grandfather set it up for my education and living expenses until I turned 25. There is about $200,000 in it right now. The room went silent. I saw Jessica's pupils dilate. $200,000. Immediate. Liquid. I can sign it over to you. I said, I can sign a deed of gift. It is my money. I can do what I want with it. Why would you do that? Jessica asked, suspicion creeping back into her voice. Because I want my life back. I lead. I want to go back to school. I want you to drop the lawsuit against Dad so he can recover without stress. If I give you the trust fund, you have cash now for the baby, for the house, for whatever you need. And in exchange, you leave us alone. Jessica took a slow sip of wine, her eyes never leaving my face. She was calculating. She was weighing the bird in the hand against the 2 in the bush. 200,000. She murmured, that would pay off the credit cards. That would pay for the nursery. And a new car, Sarah added, finishing her glass and pouring another. It is a lot of money, I said, but you have to sign an agreement tonight. I drafted a simple letter of intent. I pulled a piece of paper from under my placemat. It was meaningless, legally speaking, but to them, it looked like a surrender treaty. Jessica picked up the paper. She read it, smiling. You are finally growing up. Brooklyn, she said. I always knew you were smart. You just needed to learn your place. She reached for the bottle and refilled her glass. The tension in the room evaporated, replaced by a celebratory recklessness. They had won. The stubborn daughter had bowed the knee. Let us toast, Sarah said, raising her glass to family and to getting what we deserve. To family, I echoed, lifting my water glass. They drank. I watched. 20 minutes passed. The bottle was half empty. Sarah was flushed. Jessica was leaning back in her chair, looking at the ceiling with a dreamy expression. You know, Jessica said, her words slurring slightly, your grandfather would have wanted this. He really did love me, in his own way. Did he? I asked, softly. I was fishing. I needed the confession on tape. Oh, please, Sarah scoffed, waving a hand. He was a lonely old man with a prostate the size of a grapefruit. He did not love anyone. He just loved that your mother was the only one paying attention to him. Sarah, Jessica giggled, swatting her wife's arm. Do not be so crude. It is true, Sarah insisted. Tell her, Jess. Tell her how easy it was. Jessica swirled her wine. She looked at me. Her eyes glazed over. She felt safe. She thought I was on her side now. I was the financier. After all, he was pathetic. Really, Jessica admitted. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. Mark was so busy with work. Your Uncle David was high as a kite. The old man was sitting in that big house, rotting away. I just saw you Tsing Ha Ling. 2 hash is greater than sat with him. I held his hand. I listened to his war stories. And I prompted, and then I stopped wearing a bra. Jessica laughed. A cruel, sharp sound. Men are so simple. Brooklyn, even when they are dying, especially when they are dying, they want to feel alive one last time. I gave him that. and in return, he gave me Tom. So it was a plan? I asked. From the beginning? Of course it was a plan, Sarah interjected. We were broke. Honey, your father had cut off the alimony. We needed an insurance policy. Tom is the golden ticket, a biological link to the family fortune that Mark cannot deny. I felt a wave of nausea, but I kept my face neutral. That is, Saützinghalling, zwei Raute, ist größer als smart. I said, it is genius. Jessica corrected, and then, when the probate took too long, we went for David. Poor, sweet, addicted David. He did not even know what day it was. Jerry was even easier to make than Tom. I gripped the stem of my water glass. They were discussing the creation of human beings. My brothers, like they were manufacturing products. But what about the new baby? I asked, turning to Sarah. You said it was in vitro fertilization. That must have been expensive if you were broke. Sarah laughed so hard she choked on her wine. Red droplets sprayed onto the white tablecloth. In vitro fertilization? She wheezed. Oh, my God, you really believed that? Jessica was laughing too. They were hysterical. Two hyenas cackling over a carcass. Do you know how much in vitro fertilization costs? Sarah asked, wiping her mouth. $30,000 around. We do not have that kind of money. Not yet. Then, Saützinghalling. 2 hashes greater than who is the father? I asked. The room felt electric. This was it. Sarah leaned in, her eyes dancing with malicious delight. You know that lawyer? The one filing all the motions against your dad? Mr. Sterling? I nodded. He was a shark, a married man with 3 kids of his own. He is very Saützinghalling, 2 hashes greater than hands-on with his clients. Sarah smirked. We could not afford his retainer fee, so we worked out a trade. My jaw dropped. I did not have to fake the shock. You are sleeping with your lawyer, I whispered, to pay for the lawsuit against my father and to get a new heir. Jessica cheered, raising her glass. A baby for free legal services. It is the ultimate barter system. And he thinks it is his? I asked. He knows it is his, Sarah said, but he will never claim it. He is terrified his wife will find out, so he works for us for free. He destroys your father in court, and we get the settlement money. And the best part? We are going to put Mark's name on the birth certificate. We are going to claim it was a reconciliation fling before the heart attack. That is fraud, I said. That is massive fraud. Who is going to prove it? Jessica challenged, her eyes flashing. Mark, he is a vegetable. You are the crazy girl who hates babies. Sterling is the lawyer. He controls the narrative. She drained her glass. We are untouchable. Brooklyn, we have the house. We have the kids. And now, thanks to you, we have the trust fund. She reached out and patted my cheek. Her hand was cold. You are a good daughter. Finally, I sat there and frozen. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked at the centerpiece, knowing the phone was just inches away, recording every syllable of their depravity. They had admitted to everything: extortion, paternity fraud, predatory manipulation of a dying man, prostitution for legal services. I need to use the restroom, I said, standing up abruptly. My legs felt weak. Go ahead, Jessica said, pouring the last of the wine into Sarah's glass. We will just sit here and celebrate. I walked out of the dining room. I walked calmly until I was out of their sight. Then I sprinted to the bathroom on the first floor. I locked the door and leaned against it. Gasping for air, I checked my watch. They had been drinking for an hour. They were sloppy. They were arrogant. I waited 5 minutes. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The girl looking back was not the same girl who had run out of the coffee shop. Her eyes were hard. Her mouth was set in a grim line. I went back to the dining room. Jessica and Sarah were still there, but the energy had shifted. The alcohol had hit them hard. Jessica was resting her head on the table. Sarah was scrolling through her phone, blinking slowly. "I am going to bed," Jessica mumbled. "Help me up." I walked over and helped my mother stand. She was heavy, dead weight. I guided her to the living room sofa. She collapsed onto it and was asleep within seconds. Sarah stumbled after us. "I am going to sleep in the big bedroom," she announced. "Mark's bed is more comfortable." She wandered upstairs. I heard the door of the master bedroom close. The house was silent again. I went back to the dining room. My hands were shaking as I reached under the table. I peeled the tape away. The phone dropped into my hand. I looked at the screen. Recording. 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 32 seconds. I pressed the stop button. File saved. I did not just have a recording. I had a confession. I had the end of their careers, their reputation, and their freedom. I uploaded the file immediately to the cloud. I emailed it to myself. I emailed it to Henderson, my father's other lawyer. I saved a copy to a Universal serial bus drive. Then, I sat down in my father's chair at the head of the table. I looked at the empty wine bottle and the stained tablecloth. Mark was coming home tomorrow. The doctors had cleared him for release. Jessica had planned a welcome home party to show off her new domain to the extended family. Sao Yu Tsing Haling. 2# is greater than perfect. They wanted an audience? I would give them an audience. I looked at the phone in my hand. It was no longer just a piece of technology. It was a grenade, and I had just pulled the pin. Tomorrow, the house of cards would fall, and I would be the one to blow it down. The house had been transformed. In less than 8 hours, Jessica had hired a cleaning crew to scrub away the filth of her occupation and replaced it with the veneer of high society. The smell of sewage was masked by mountains of fresh white hydrangeas. The muddy footprints on the hardwood were hidden beneath rented red carpets. It was Saturday, the day Mark came home. Jessica called it a reunion gala. She had invited everyone, the partners from my father's firm, the judgmental neighbors from the homeowners association, and the extended family members who only appeared when there was free food or a tragedy. She wanted witnesses. She wanted to cement her narrative as the devoted ex-wife who had stepped in to save the crumbling dynasty. I stood on the balcony of the second floor, looking down at the foyer. I was wearing a simple navy dress. I had spent the last hour connecting my laptop to the central audio-visual system of the house. The mansion was a smart home, wired for sound in every room. Usually, it played Mozart. Today, it was going to play the truth. The guests began to arrive at 5 o'clock. They flowed in like a tide of expensive cologne and fake smiles. I watched them whisper behind their hands. They were not here to celebrate Mark's recovery. They were here to see the wreckage. They wanted to see the mistress who became the wife, the daughter who had a meltdown in a restaurant, and the illegitimate children who were rewriting the family tree. Jessica was in her element. She wore a champagne-colored gown that sparkled under the chandelier. Sarah stood beside her, wearing a maternity dress that accentuated her bump, playing the role of the glowing, expectant mother. Then, the front doors opened, and the ambulance crew wheeled my father in. Mark looked skeletal. He was sitting in a transport wheelchair, a blanket over his lap. His face was gray, his eyes hollow. He looked like a man who had already accepted his own funeral. Jessica rushed forward, throwing her arms around him. "Welcome home, darling," she announced, loud enough for the back of the room to hear. "We have missed you so much." Mark flinched at her touch, but he was too weak to push her away. He looked around the room, bewildered by the crowd. He saw the faces of his colleagues. He saw the judgment. He lowered his head, defeated. I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. I could feel their eyes. The crazy daughter, the girl who hated babies. I walked straight to the audio control panel, hidden behind a decorative screen in the living room. It was next to the large 80-inch television that Jessica had set up to display a slideshow of family memories. Currently, the screen showed a photo of Jessica and Mark from 20 years ago, smiling on a beach. It was propaganda. I checked the HDMI cable. It was secure. Jessica tapped a spoon against a champagne flute. The sharp ring cut through the chatter. "Everyone, please," she called out, stepping onto the small riser she had installed. "Can I have your attention?" The room went silent. 100 people turned to look at her. "I just want to say a few words," Jessica began, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. He sat, frozen, in his wheelchair, staring at the floor. "These past few weeks have been a nightmare," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Seeing Mark so ill, Saoyutsing Haoling, 2# is greater than, it broke our hearts. But it also brought us together. It reminded us that family is the most important thing." She gestured to Sarah and the boys, who were being held by a nanny she had hired for the day. "We have had our differences," she continued, wiping a fake tear, "but we put them aside. I moved back in to care for Mark. Sarah and I are dedicating our lives to raising these beautiful children and the new blessing on the way. We are a modern family. It is unconventional, yes, but it is filled with love." A few guests clapped politely. Most just stared. "And I want to thank my daughter, Brooklyn," Jessica added, looking directly at me with a smirk. "She has been Saoyutsing Haoling. 2# is greater than challenging. But last night, she finally understood. She graciously donated her trust fund to help support her brothers. She realized that love is about sacrifice." The room murmured. They were impressed. The rebellious daughter had been tamed. Jessica had won. She raised her glass to a new beginning, to the bloodline. This was it. I tapped the spacebar on my laptop. The photo of the beach vanished from the giant screen. It was replaced by a black background with a single audio waveform in the center. The speakers, which had been playing soft jazz, crackled. Then, a voice boomed through the room, crystal clear, undeniable. Sarah's voice. He was a lonely old man with a prostate the size of a grapefruit. He did not love anyone. The glass in Jessica's hand slipped. It hit the floor and shattered. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. Jessica's voice. Saoyutsing Haoling. 2# is greater than sat with him. I held his hand. Saoyutsing Haoling. 2# is greater than. And then I stopped wearing a bra. Men are so simple. Brooklyn, even when they are dying. Especially when they are dying. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw the partners from the law firm exchange horrified looks. Jessica stood frozen on the stage, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She looked at the screen, then at me. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Turn it off," she screamed. "Brooklyn, Turn it off right now." I did not move. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. Sarah's voice. "Tom is the golden ticket, a biological link to the family fortune that Mark cannot deny." Mark's head snapped up. The fog in his eyes cleared instantly. He looked at the screen, listening to the women discuss the manufacturing of his brothers. Someone in the crowd laughed. It was a nervous, shocked sound. Then, phones went up. Everyone was recording. They were live streaming the gala. But now it was a true crime documentary. Jessica's voice. And the best part? We are going to put Mark's name on the birth certificate. We are going to claim it was a reconciliation fling before the heart attack. Sarah's voice. "You know that lawyer, Mr. Sterling? We could not afford his retainer fee. So, we worked out a trade." Jessica's voice. "A baby for free legal services. It is the ultimate barter system." The room erupted. I saw Mrs. Sterling, the wife of the lawyer mentioned on the tape, standing near the buffet table. She dropped her plate. Her face went white. Then, a deep, violent red. Jessica lunged for the television, trying to find the power cord. She was clawing at the wall. Desperate. "It is a fake," she shrieked, turning to the crowd. "It is artificial intelligence. She made it with a computer. She is trying to ruin me." But the recording continued. It was relentless. Sarah's voice. "We are untouchable. Brooklyn, Sauding Hulling. 2 hash is greater than Mark is a vegetable. You are the crazy girl. Sauding Hall, Lean. 2 hash is greater than Sterling is the lawyer. He controls the narrative." Mark stood up. It was slow and shaky, but he stood up. He pushed the wheelchair away. It rolled backward and crashed into the wall. "Mark?" Jessica whispered, turning to see him towering over her. My father walked up the 2 steps to the riser. He looked like a revenant, a corpse brought back to life by pure fury. He reached out and took the microphone from Jessica's hand. "Get out," he said. His voice was not loud. It was a low rumble, like an earthquake deep underground. "Mark, listen to me," Jessica pleaded, grabbing his arm. "That is not real. She drugged us. Mark backhanded her. It was not a punch. It was a slap, sharp and dismissive. Jessica stumbled back, tripping over her gown and falling hard onto the stage. The crowd gasped again. Nobody moved to help her. "Get out of my house," Mark roared. The sound tore through his throat, raw and terrifying. He turned to Sarah. She was clutching her stomach, backing away. "And take your bastards with you," he spat. Mrs. Sterling was now marching through the crowd. She grabbed a bottle of wine from a passing waiter, a bottle of 1996 Cabernet, ironically, and hurled it at Sarah. It missed, shattering against the wall, splashing red wine over the white hydrangeas. "You whore," Mrs. Sterling screamed. "You slept with my husband?" Chaos broke loose. The neighbors were filming. The business partners were calling their drivers. The carefully constructed facade of the reunion gala had turned into a Roman arena. Jessica scrambled to her feet. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild. She looked at me. "I will kill you," she screamed, lunging toward me. "You little witch. I will kill you." 2 security guards, hired by Jessica for the party, stepped in, but they did not stop me. They stopped her. Mark had signaled them. "Remove them," Mark ordered, pointing a shaking finger at the door. "Throw them in the street." I stood still, watching the guards grab Jessica and Sarah by the arms. They dragged them toward the door, their heels scraping against the floor. They were screaming, cursing, blaming everyone but themselves. The nanny, terrified, hurried after them with Tom and Jerry. The boys were crying. For a second, I felt a pang of pity for them. They were losing their home again. But then I remembered the smashed watch collection. I remembered the sewage. The pity evaporated as they were shoved out the front door into the cool night air where the paparazzi were surely waiting. The room fell into a stunned silence. The recording had ended. The screen was black. Mark stood on the stage. Alone, he swayed slightly. I walked over to him. I did not hug him. I just stood beside him. A soldier reporting for duty. Dad, I said softly, sit down. He looked at me. His eyes were wet, but they were clear. The weakness was gone. The shame was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. They are gone, he whispered. Yes, I said, looking out at the room of shocked guests. They are gone. But as I looked at the faces of the people recording us, I knew it was not over. The video of the confession was already uploading. The internet would feast on this tonight. Jessica was destroyed. Sarah was ruined. The lawyer, Sterling, would be disbarred by morning. We had won. So why did I feel so cold? I looked at my father. He was not the same man, and I was not the same daughter. We were survivors of a massacre, standing in the ruins of our dignity. The party was over, but the hangover was going to last a lifetime. The silence that follows a hurricane is not peaceful. It is heavy. It is a vacuum that sucks the air out of your lungs, leaving you gasping in the wreckage. The last of the guests had fled an hour ago. They scurried away like cockroaches when the kitchen light is turned on, clutching their pearls and their smartphones, eager to upload the tragedy they had just witnessed. The driveway was empty. The gala was over. I stood in the center of the living room. The floor was sticky with spilled champagne and the remnants of the smashed wine bottle. The white hydrangeas, once pristine, were now drooping, stained purple like bruised flesh. My father was sitting on the sofa where Jessica had been sleeping just the night before. He was not looking at me. He was staring at the blank television screen, the black mirror that had destroyed his life. I walked over to the window. Outside, beyond the iron gates, I could see the flashing lights of a police cruiser. The neighbors must have called them when the screaming started on the front lawn. I watched as a tow truck hooked up Jessica's minivan. They were gone, physically. At least, Mark, I said softly. My father did not flinch. He reached for a bottle of scotch, a fresh one, and poured a glass. His hands were steady now. That terrified me more than the shaking. The shaking was fear. The steadiness was something else. It was the numbness of a man who has been hollowed out. We need to call the locksmith, I said, trying to be practical. We need to change the codes. I already did, Mark said. His voice was flat, devoid of any inflection. I called a private security firm. They are posting 2 armed guards at the gate 24 hours a day. Nobody gets in. Nobody. I nodded. That is good. We are safe now. Safe? Mark repeated the word as if it were a foreign language. He turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were cold, like chips of flint. Is that what you call this? Brooklyn? Safety? I saved you, I said, feeling a defensive flare of anger in my chest. I saved the house. I saved your fortune. If I had not played that recording, they would have bled you dry. You know that. I know, Mark said. He took a long swallow of the amber liquid. But did you have to enjoy it so much? I froze. 邵玉静好 Ling 2# is greater than what? I saw your face. Mark whispered. When the recording was playing, when Jessica was screaming, you were smiling. Brooklyn. It was a small smile, but it was there. You were not just protecting me, you were executing them. I felt a chill run down my spine. Had I smiled? I did not remember. All I remembered was the rush of adrenaline, the intoxicating feeling of finally holding the power after years of being the victim. They deserved it, I said, my voice hardening. After everything they did, the incest, the fraud, the gaslighting, they deserved to be humiliated. Maybe, Mark said. He turned back to the television, but you destroyed the family name to do it. By tomorrow morning, everyone in Connecticut will know. The firm, the club, the world. You burned down the village to kill the wolf. It was the only way, I insisted. Mark did not answer. He just poured another drink. I realized then that there would be no thank you. There would be no tearful reunion where he hugged me and told me I was his hero. I had saved his assets. Yes, but I had stripped him of his dignity. To him, I was just another woman who had betrayed him, another source of pain. I turned and walked away. I could not be in that room anymore. I walked through the house. It felt vast and empty, like a museum after closing time. I went upstairs to the guest rooms where they had stayed. The rooms were trashed. In their haste to leave, or perhaps in their fury while being dragged out, they had overturned lamps and ripped sheets. The smell of them lingered, that cloying mix of cheap perfume and stale baby formula. I walked into the room that was supposed to be the nursery. The crib was still there, assembled but empty. I ran my hand along the wooden railing. I thought about Sarah. I thought about the baby she was carrying, the child of the lawyer. Mr. Sterling. I checked my phone. The news was already breaking. A local gossip blog had picked up the live stream. The headline read, Greenwich Gala Horror, Incest, Fraud, and a Brawl at the Mansion. Mr. Sterling had already deleted his LinkedIn profile. His wife had posted a status update stating she was filing for divorce. The dominoes were falling exactly as I had calculated. Jessica and Sarah were homeless. They had no money, no lawyer, and a reputation that was radioactive. They were likely sitting in a motel room right now, screaming at each other, blaming each other for the downfall. I should have felt triumphant. I had won the war. The enemy was vanquished, but as I stood in the dark nursery, I felt nothing but a gaping hole in my chest. I looked at my reflection in the window. My face looked older. The lines around my mouth were tighter. My eyes looked just like my mother's eyes. Cold, calculating, unforgiving. I had become a monster to fight a monster. I walked back to my own bedroom. It was the only place that felt remotely like mine, but even that was tainted. I sat on my bed and looked at the cracked iPhone 6 on my desk. The weapon, I picked it up and walked to the bathroom. I filled the sink with water. I dropped the phone in. Bubbles rose to the surface as the device drowned. It was over, but as I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling, I could hear the silence of the house pressing down on me. It was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a graveyard. My father was downstairs, drinking himself into oblivion. My mother was out there somewhere, plotting her next move, because cockroaches never truly die. And I was here, alone in a mansion that felt more like a prison than a home. I closed my eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, the image of Tom and Jerry being dragged out by the security guards played on a loop in my mind. They were innocent. They were victims of a twisted bloodline, just like me, and I had thrown them to the wolves without a second thought. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow. We survived, I whispered to the empty room, but I knew, deep down, that survival was not the same thing as living. And as the clock ticked toward midnight, marking the end of the worst week of my life, I wondered if I would ever really be able to wash the stain of this family off my skin. They call the wind in Chicago the hawk. It does not just blow, it hunts. It waits for you at the corners of the steel skyscrapers. And when you step out, it slices through your coat, your skin, and settles deep in your marrow. It is a brutal, unforgiving cold. I love it. It feels honest. It has been exactly 1 year since the night of the gala. 1 year since I burned my family to the ground and walked away from the ashes. I do not live in Connecticut anymore. I transferred to a university here in the Midwest, where nobody cares about my last name and nobody knows about the viral video that ruined 3 lives. I go by my middle name now. I wear thick coats and keep my head down. I am free, technically, but freedom has a strange aftertaste. It tastes like metal and silence. I sat in a coffee shop overlooking the gray waters of Lake Michigan. It was not a fancy place like the Gilded Bean. The tables were sticky, and the coffee was burnt. I preferred it this way. I unlocked my phone. I told myself I would stop checking, but it is an addiction. Like picking at a scab to make sure it still bleeds. I opened the TikTok app. I typed in the username. The Exiled Moms. There they were. Jessica and Sarah. They were live streaming from a small, cluttered apartment in New Jersey. The lighting was ring light perfect. Jessica was crying. Tears that stopped exactly at her jawline. Preserving her makeup, Sarah was holding a new baby. A little girl with tufts of red hair. The lawyer's child. Thank you for the galaxy gift. User 204. Jessica chirped, her voice instantly switching from grief to gratitude. You guys are the only family we have left. The corrupt legal system took everything, but they cannot take our spirit. I watched the comments roll in. Hearts, roses, cash donations. You are so brave. Mama, screw that rich husband. Justice for the babies. They had spun the narrative. In their version, Mark was an abusive tyrant, and I was the spoiled, mentally ill daughter who had doctored the recording with artificial intelligence. They were the victims of a patriarchal conspiracy, and the internet, in its infinite stupidity, believed them. They were making $3,000 a month on donations alone. I turned off the screen. The cockroaches had survived the nuclear blast. They were thriving in the radiation. I looked out the window. My father was not so lucky. I had spoken to Henderson, the lawyer, last week. Mark was alone in the mansion. He had fired the cleaning staff because he thought they were planting bugs. He had boarded up the windows of the nursery. He spent his days in the security room, watching the monitors, waiting for an enemy that had already moved on to a new platform. He was a king in a castle of ghosts, slowly losing his mind to the silence. I sipped my black coffee. I should feel guilty. I should feel sad. But I looked at my reflection in the dark window glass. My hair was cut short, a sharp bob that framed my face. My eyes were clear, devoid of the fear that used to haunt them. I saw Jessica looking back at me, not the physical resemblance. It was something deeper. It was the set of the jaw, the cold calculation in the gaze. I had beaten her because I was exactly like her. I had used her tactics. I had manipulated the truth. I had performed for an audience. I had destroyed people to get what I wanted. I told myself it was for justice. But was it? Or was it just the bloodline asserting itself. The toxic genetic material waking up and taking the wheel. I paid for my coffee and walked out into the biting wind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was an unknown number with a Connecticut area code. I stared at it. It could be Henderson giving me an update on Dad's deteriorating mental state. It could be a reporter who tracked me down. Or it could be Tom. He would be 5 years old now, old enough to use a phone, old enough to ask why his sister hated him, old enough to ask why he was both a brother and an uncle. My thumb hovered over the green answer button. If I answered, I would be pulled back in. I would have to explain. I would have to care. I looked at the gray sky. I thought about the baby girl in Sarah's arms. Another generation. Another victim. I made a vow right then. Standing on the corner of Michigan Avenue, the line ends with me. I would never marry. I would never have children. I would not pass this poison down to another innocent soul. The cruelty, the manipulation, the hunger, it would die in my body. I would be the firewall. I pressed the red button. Block Heller. I shoved the phone deep into my pocket. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck and stepped into the crowd of strangers. They walked fast, heads down, fighting the wind. I joined them. I was just another face in the cold, another story hidden under a wool coat. I was Brooklyn, the daughter who won the war, the daughter who lost her soul. And as the snow began to fall, covering the dirty sidewalk in a blanket of pure, temporary white, I finally smiled. It was a cold smile, a Jessica smile, but it was the only one I had left.